Hi, so there's been another live Q&A from Hazzikostas, game director of World of Warcraft, and in the first of the videos where I want to go through what they've said, of course, top of the list as a raider myself is going to be the news about Master Looter, although it's quite disappointing that they didn't go into details on it. This is the slight problem with a live Q&A in the way that they do it. It's absolutely brilliant, by the way. I'm not criticising it. I was a big fan of it as soon as it was introduced in WoD. The downside to it is, though, sometimes they give an answer to a question and then you think to yourself, but there's follow-up questions there. And if they were being interviewed, it'd be like an interviewer would, a good interviewer would think of those follow-up questions and then we'd get more details. But we've got enough details to have something to talk about here. And this was the question. I think it's really important to actually show the question on this one because the wording is crucial. Someone asked, not like Vix apparently. Apparently this person isn't like Vix. I don't know who Vix is, but whoever Vix is not like Vix. But the question was, with recent pushes toward personal loot, is there a reasonable expectation that it will be the only option for current level raids going forward into BFA? Hazzikostas at that point said, yes, that is a reasonable expectation. And went further to explain that basically the primary way of distributing loot in Battle for Azeroth will be personal loot. And, you're trying to think in your head of, are they really meaning this, that there is no master loot anymore? But, I've rewatched and rewatched what he said, and it does sound like no more master looter. So, here are some of the things they've said. The first thing he said was that master loot is primarily used for distributing set pieces, tier armor. Now, at that point, my heart sank a little bit because I'm thinking, no, that's not true. The problem is, I'm not opposed to master looter being removed in a way. I'll come on to that in a moment. The problem is, if the basic premise of if you're doing something is wrong, it makes you worry if this is going to work out as you imagine it is. Because this is all about changing player behaviour. Make no mistake, they said this themselves. They didn't use the exact words, but this is about changing player behaviour. The problem is, Blizzard have tried to do this before, sometimes successfully, sometimes not successfully. Where it's not successful, where they don't successfully encourage a particular behaviour or dissuade another behaviour, is where their basic premise is wrong, and this is it. Master Looter is not just for distributing tier. Of course it's for distributing that, but it's for distributing everything else as well. When everyone's got their tier pieces, do raiding guilds say, right, we're going personal loot now, just to make it quicker and easier? No. Master Looter is still used. Master Looter is all about getting pieces to the people for whom it will be the biggest upgrade. Okay, that's it. Now, what he did talk about was that is not their primary motivation, but it's a nice side effect. The primary motivation was for split runs, and this is what made total sense. In fact, split runs, for those who don't know what split raids are and split runs are, so increasingly, the top guilds have been doing this for years, but increasingly from WoD really, even, mythic guilds still, but, much lower down, progress mythic guilds have increasingly been doing multiple runs, especially on the first week. So the first week comes out, it's normal and heroic. There's no mythic, it's normal and heroic. So you can just go through the content in your normal raid group, get what gear you can, great. But what's more efficient is if each of those raiders can have a second character that's geared enough to be able to do that raid on normal and heroic at least, then you could do 2 runs. You do 2 raids. Each raid has half mains and half alts. And the idea is you can basically get twice as much loot because you're going to run that raid twice. All the alts are there to contribute, well, to help with the fight, but also to contribute loot. The more people you have in your raid, the more gear drops. So normally in heroic you can have up to 30 people. If you can get 30 characters in that raid, that's maximum number of drops, and you funnel it to those players. More serious guilds have even more runs. They can funnel lots and lots of loot onto a single player. That makes them very, very powerful. That creates a situation where you've got a raider who potentially has weeks worth of loot in 1 week. Now, what Ian Hazzikostas was explaining is that, well, I think it was actually Law in particular explained that particular one, I have to say. Josh Allen, that is. What that creates is a situation where, as you do that raid, you're already much higher item level than you sort of should be. So they have to tune the content to be more difficult to give those serious skills a challenge. That then makes it much, much more difficult for everyone else. And even lower down the curve, as I say, it probably wasn't such an issue. In fact, I don't think it really was an issue when it was only the very top guilds doing it. But as increasingly you've had other ones further down the curve doing it, the ones who do even a single split raid, so they just, do 2 raids for normal and heroic the first couple of weeks, those people, and some of them will do it for more than the first couple of weeks, those people are going to have a significant advantage on a similar guild that doesn't do that. And they will inevitably get further. And guild ranks and all the rest of it is affected by that. It's not the only thing that affects it, of course, but it is one of the factors that affects it. Now, nobody likes the concept of split raids. That's another important thing to state here. Obviously, the game designers don't like it. It's not the behaviour that they want to see modelled. But we as players, from the very top all the way down, it's a pain in the arse we can do without. So even players don't really like it. But ideas that have come out in the past have always run along the lines of something that makes the game even worse or brings a greater problem. You always have to be sure that the cure isn't worse than the disease. Now, the last time I did a video on this, one thing I did say is, along the lines of loot, maybe if you introduce personal loot for the first 2 weeks of the raid, that would dissuade most guilds from doing it. It may not dissuade the very top guilds from doing it at a certain point. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. But it would definitely dissuade those lower down. Because if you're not going to get the benefit in the first couple of weeks, it's not really as worth it doing it later on. But what we're talking about here is just having personal loot altogether. Now, the purpose of it, as they've said themselves, is to create a level playing field so that you don't create a situation where a guild that doesn't do it is disadvantaged over a guild that does do it. And that's fine. Anything that gets rid of split raiding is going to be largely welcomed. The people I think that would be most disappointed about the loss of split raiding would be the people who got to, spend a few coins and get a little bit of loot on their alts during these things to give them a bit of a boost up and therefore make it easy to get into pugs the following weeks and so on. But the majority will agree that it's a pain in the arse. But here's the problem. Is the cure better than the disease? I'm not so sure. How will it dissuade split runs? Well, it works like this. Let's say you do a split raid and you have half mains and half alts. It's personal loot, so everyone gets their own little bit of loot, where you think to yourself, well, personal loot can be traded. So when alt gets a piece of loot, hand it over, give it to me. Of course, they can't, because in a new raid, that's definitely going to be higher, or almost definitely going to be higher item level than what they've got in the same slot. Obviously, you are not allowed to trade something that's higher item level than you already possess in the same slot. So that's going to prevent it being traded over. So therefore, that is why there's no point in doing the split raids. But what happens a few weeks later? So you've not done your split raids, okay. The guild I'm in now doesn't do split raids anyway. So you don't do your split raids. And in a few weeks, all of a sudden, people are going to be starting to get things from personal loot, which actually might be a downgrade in terms of item level at any rate. Now, what's going to happen then? Remember, what they said about master loot being primarily used to distribute tier sets, set pieces, is wrong. They're wrong about that. It's for distributing everything. What is inevitably going to happen is that the guild officers are going to say, look, after the first couple of weeks, people are definitely now getting stuff that can be traded. If anyone has anything that can be traded, hand it to us and we will distribute it. That creates a very messy situation for a number of reasons. 3 main reasons. One is the extra time it's going to take to do it. All right. Already as it is, it can take some time, especially in the first few weeks when there's a lot of people needing on different bits of gear. It can take sometimes a little while, depending on the organisation of your guild and how much forethought's gone into it, time to decide who to allocate bits of loot to. This would make it take even longer because you've got to do all that and you've got to get people to hand over the stuff that they can trade. Secondly, it's going to create a little bit of resentment. Someone gets a BIS trinket or something like that, or worse still, a BIS weapon, and they're told to hand it over, and it might go to someone else. That is going to create resentment. Now, okay, you can argue, right, individual guilds could then maybe, to avoid that, generate the situation where, all right, we're just going to do what Blizzard want us to do and just treat it as personal loot. If you've got something that you can trade and you don't want it, then please trade it like you would in LFR. But at that point, then again, you're giving your guild a disadvantage, because maybe that BIS trinket or BIS weapon, it might be BIS for you, but it might not be BIS for someone else who can get more out of it. You know, if it does an extra, you know, I've got to try and tune things down here, DPS-wise. Let's say it does an extra 1,000 DPS for you, but it does an extra 2,000 DPS for someone else. Where's it better off going for the guild? So, you know, there is that as well. It creates a sticky situation there. And third, you create a situation of honesty versus dishonesty. What if some people say, oh, I can't trade it. I ain't got anything higher, when they really have. And obviously they wouldn't be silly enough to have it equipped because people will call them out on it. But then even if they did, let's say they were a bit stupid and someone called them out on it, again, you're creating friction in the guild. What if it's genuine? What if you genuinely can't trade it? Someone got it in their head that you had a higher item level piece, even though you've not equipped it, and then they think that you're trying to screw the raid out of it. Again, bad blood. It's, you know, and so what you're going to create is a situation, unless they do something and stop personal loot being tradable, because that's the only way you would prevent this, but I don't think that's what they want to do. You create that situation where it's great that it's going to stop the split raids, but you put a guild in a situation where they're either going to have to spend more time and risk putting people's noses out of joint by saying, hand it all to me and I will distribute it, or you decide it's not worth the social fractures this could create in your guild and just go with what Blizzard want and just make everything personal loot, and maybe not get the pieces on the people who could really benefit most from it. And then even if you do the personal loot route, you can potentially have a situation where people are, like in LFR, you know how it is in LFR, people are begging you, do you need that, do you need that? You might get that in guilds. Don't imagine that sort of thing wouldn't happen in a mythic guild. Of course it would. Or do you really need it? Are you going to use it much? And because it's personal loot, like, it's yours. You sort of feel it's yours. Even if in the guild rules, it's like, well, you should really try and give it to whoever's going to get the most out of it. And there'll be some players who will. There'll be some players who go, yeah, it's an upgrade for me, but maybe it's a bigger upgrade for you. And then maybe there's some people in the guild who will just jealously guard any upgrade they get and insist it's the best upgrade ever. And you create a situation where, without any real control by the officers, because how can they control personal loot, you've got some people getting way better gear than others just because they're more selfish. Bit of a can of worms, this one. Bit of a can of worms. But anyway, those are my thoughts. I'm getting ready to go and test Islands now on the alpha, which I'll be streaming tonight. So join me there if you like. I will be doing a video of that later on as well. So let me know your thoughts below. How do you think this would affect you? In your guild, how would you perceive this going? How do you think it would be worked out? Like if you've liked the video. The link to watch the full Q&A is also down below, of course. And thanks very much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, I'll see you later.